the world's largest short-term rental operator, publicly traded, Airbnb arbitrage, has filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy today. This is absolutely one of the biggest, most significant things we can see happen at the end of this year going into 2026, because it will absolutely influence the way that we run our businesses. I'm reading one of their quarterly reports and I am honestly dizzy right now. So in this video, we're going to go over who Sonder is, why it's significant that they went out of business, and how they went out of business. That's probably the craziest part, because there's a hot take here, and what it means for us as operators. So Riley, could you please throw in slide number 1 for me here? Let's let people see what's going on. There we go. So guys, the press release came out today that Sonder is going to immediately wind down all of their operations. And Sonder currently has about 9,400 doors, which is a lot of doors. And they're all Airbnb arbitrage, and they primarily take over buildings. They founded in 2014, I believe, and they founded kind of like how a lot of us Airbnb arbitrage people do, a few doors at a time. They've grown so big that they started negotiating entire buildings with investors, and that's how they survived COVID-19. When COVID-19 hit, some of the biggest arbitrage companies in the world failed because they ran out of cash. But what happened is Stay Alfred and the Guild and all of these other companies that hobbled through, they eventually all ran out of cash shortly after COVID-19, and Stay Alfred maybe is the most famous one that went out of business. But Sonder stayed in business because their leases told landlords that if the stock market dropped more than 700 points in a day, they get a free month of rent. If there was a pandemic or epidemic or something, they get a free month of rent. That was all in their leases. So inside of their leases, they got 3 or 6 months of rent for free from landlords, and that's how they survived. But apparently that wasn't good enough, and they ran into some more headwinds. Riley, hit us with number 2 so people can see what's going on. What's up, David? Hey guys, welcome to the live stream. This stream is about Sonder. They just filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. We're about to talk about who they are, why they failed, and why it's significant. So welcome to the live stream, guys. So when we're reading Sonder's press release right here, this is on their own website. They say that they ran into cash headwinds and a problem with a deal that they were trying to work out with Marriott Bonvoy. So you can see on the thumbnail of this listing that there was even a logo made. Marriott was licensing to Sonder, and that was going to be one of their big cash plays. What you may not know, let's catch you up. When Sonder went public in 2014, there's a guy named Francis who was the CEO. He was the CEO until 2025, until this June, and he stepped down finally. And an interim CEO, we have the name, I'll show you on the next slide, she stepped in. She only had 4 or 5 months to save the day, and she just didn't have enough time to pull it off. So they're claiming cash constraints and the fact that a deal fell through. But reading this Q10, man, we're going to go over the Q10 here in a second. They were doomed. They've been doomed for a long time. So yeah, Riley, let's bring on the stats. Let's talk about who Sonder is. So Sonder, website. They've got their own direct booking website. Let's actually touch on this too. One of Sonder's plays, one of the things that they said in their press release, is they were having a hard time gaining traction here. And I don't know if they mean that they're trying to get this connected to Marriott, or if they were just trying to get enough customers off the Airbnb platform, but they failed. They failed to get their technology right and get their customer base right, and they ran out of cash. So yeah, let's hit this next slide. Thank you, Riley. So Sonder, let me make sure I read off the same thing, because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here, my friends. So Sonder had gone public in 2014, like I said, Francis. They went public at $1.9 billion. That's a massive public exit for a company that owns not a single property. And when they went public, they had about 7,600 doors. I've been operating next to Sonder in multiple cities for years. We've seen these guys around. And looking at their product, if you've ever stayed in a Sonder, some of you probably have stayed in a Sonder. They're nothing to write home about. They're usually dirty. They're like bare bones. The furniture is in disrepair. The buildings often suck. And, you know, we saw the writing on the wall here, but they had scale. And maybe it's because they had scale and they had a big sexy exit that many of us operators, we wanted scale too. We thought, you know, if we can get some scale, this is going to be so great. This is exciting. And I think it misled a lot of people. And it also led to a lot of the problems that we see in the short-term rental industry. A lot of you hosts who are sick and tired of Airbnb's policies, you have Sonder to thank for those policies. And we're going to get into that also in a second. So Sonder, Riley, let's go to the next one, because let's talk about why this is significant. And maybe we'll make some room for some Q&A at the end of this, guys, because we're going to rail through the stuff that you need to know, and we're going to talk a little bit more deep on this stuff. So Sonder is the biggest failure to date in this space. right? Like we just talked about, Stay Alfred went out of business. They had 2,700 doors when they failed. Companies like Zeus that were focusing on homes, they failed. The Guild, they ran out of cash. They were Austin-based. They failed. Vacasa was a publicly traded company, and they were just bought out for pennies on the dollar by Casago, Steve Schwab, really cool guy. And he's bought out all the Vacasa properties, and they do a lot of co-hosting. And he's trying to recover that whole world and try to improve that and get a value add out of maintaining those relationships where Vacasa was failing, right? But the fact that Sonder failed now years later in 2025, it's not COVID related, it's nothing to do with that. This was a clean year, right? They had all the time in the world to recover from COVID. The fact that they're failing now is like an ominous factor for anybody who does arbitrage. And it's going to have a ripple effect across the investment space. It's going to have a ripple effect across the relationship with landlord space, relationship with co-host. It's going to be huge, but positively for Airbnb operators, because they are shedding 9,000 plus doors right around the world. Many cities like Philadelphia or Atlanta or Boston or Chicago are going to experience a deflation of inventory, and you hosts in these cities should see a little bit of revenue lift, a little ADR lift, because there's less competition. And this could lead to positive headwinds for Airbnb too. This could be good for their brand. But yeah, I do think that largely this is going to infect investor and landlord and co-host sentiment. If this gets enough news and enough traction, buildings may not want to do business because if Sonder failed, who can survive? But a lot of people don't understand that Sonder failed because they made the same mistakes that Stay Alfred made. And they made the same mistakes that a lot of tech companies make. And they applied tech solutions to a hospitality industry. They had it wrong from the start. They thought that making their own website and getting direct bookings was going to be the thing that made them so successful and sexy. Well, now, 2025, because Airbnb has lost a little bit of its staying power, you do want to have your own direct booking website. But they abandoned hospitality for the sake of trying to make a tech stack. And they just never dialed in their hospitality first. And this is the type of business, and you hosts know this better than anybody else. If you cannot make one guest happy, you cannot make 100 guests happy. And if you can't make 100 guests happy and maintain a 4.9 or better ranking on 100 guests, you do not need to be trying to have 100,000 guests, right? If you can't nail the sauce at 100 guests, you shouldn't be doing it at 100,000. And Sonder is a perfect example of this. So now here's the hot take. Here's the fun stuff. Riley, hit it. Hit it. All right. Airbnb murdered Sonder, all right? I've been saying this is going to happen for a long time. And those of you who follow this channel, when we talk about the algorithm and stuff, and Airbnb's policies changes, I've told you Airbnb's making this or that change because of companies like Sonder. Yeah, good, cool. I want to make sure that we're still streaming good. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're midstream, we're talking about how the biggest company in the world, private, or the biggest publicly traded Airbnb arbitrage company in the world just went out of business. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and we're at the part now where Airbnb put them out of business through their policy changes. There's 3 major policy changes that I put up here. I'm going to do this from memory. They changed their off-platform policy, they changed their circumvention policy, and they put in guest favorites, and they killed Superhost. All of these we were not necessarily happy about, were we guys? Remember, the off-platform policy made it harder for us to talk to guests. They've even made a proxy phone number, kind of like Booking.com does now with emails and stuff. You can't just call the guest's phone number. You can't just text them. Airbnb's trying to keep guest information because companies like Sonder were trying to get a person from Airbnb on their very first touch to download Sonder's app and do everything and become a Sonder guest. You know, Sonder was trying to funnel as many guests as possible from the Airbnb platform. And this was a threat to Airbnb. So they had to change their policies to hold on to their guests more. Now, the non-circumvention policy is because companies like Sonder and a lot of companies that have scale, like Stay Alfred and Guild and everybody else, they have some trash properties. And these big companies, they have a vested interest in finding ways to get them back into every channel. They're going to have a bad property, get bad reviews, put it back on Airbnb again, and just keep doing this. They've got people dedicated to putting listings up. It's very hard to keep these guys away. They're like cockroaches. They don't die. So Airbnb started investing into AI and now new policy to keep people from taking a bad listing and putting it on Airbnb. But Airbnb is really overreached with this, right, guys? You can have a middling listing, nothing really wrong with it, and there's a reason why you need to recreate the listing. Let's say you added a pool, hot tub, and you want to give it a new shot because you've got better features, or you redesigned the place. Airbnb, or you change your account. Airbnb won't let you recreate your listings because this system is trying to prevent you from bypassing. If you don't have a perfect score, Airbnb is going to assume that you're circumventing the algorithm. And the reason why you guys are seeing this is we've finally figured out what the algorithm is really based around, which is what I call a true negative score. And every listing that doesn't have a perfect score has a negative score. And because you have even a slightly negative score, you have something to circumvent according to Airbnb's algorithm. And that's why you guys haven't been able to create new listings. But the biggest thing that Airbnb did that is really what drove the nail into Sonder's coffin and put them out of business, the reason why we think that they've seen such a big loss, and if you read their Q10, they lost $7,000 of cash per door, after also claiming that they made $12,000 per door in cash. I don't think they made that much. But even with the cash flow they claimed that they made, they still lost $7,000 per door in operating, okay, like proceeds or whatever. Crazy number. This cratering of income that Sonder experienced was because Airbnb killed Superhost. See, Sonder has 9,400 doors as we speak. They're trying to get to 10,000. If Sonder could have some accounts that had Superhost and then some accounts that didn't, right? They were compartmentalized. You'd see that there was a Sonder Philly, Sonder Chicago. And if they could get these accounts up to Superhost for a little while, they would push accounts into the Superhost account to give it an artificial boost. So as long as enough listings were good enough for Superhost in one account, they could temporarily get boosts on a bunch of listings, and they would start to play like this 3-card Monte of moving their listings around to hop from Superhost account to Superhost account to get the algorithm boost. Airbnb couldn't find a way to stop them while maintaining Superhost. There's no way to pull this off. So for Airbnb to kill Sonder's 3-card Monte game of being able to gamify Superhost for the boost, what they did is they just removed all boosts from Superhost. Now you see guest favorites. Guest favorites requires you to have more than 5 reviews. You cannot give somebody a cleaning fee refund, and you can't cancel their stay. You can't have any negative marks related to reliability. And this is the part that Sonder really can't fight, right? This is where it was genius. See, Sonder could pay somebody all the money in the world to say, hey, don't give us a bad review, we're so sorry. They could decide that a listing or that an account had 200 listings, and in order to maintain Superhost, they could give a guest $300 on a stay that wasn't even $300. They just pay off the guest. And Airbnb found out that Sonder had enough money to maintain Superhost in really illegitimate ways. So now, though, if you gave a guest a cleaning fee refund or you gave them a refund for their stay and they still gave you a 5-star review, you still can't be guest favorite. You still lose the boost. So Airbnb tied performance not just to this passive metric that comes from after the guest leaves, but internal documentation. And just so you know, you can go to Airbnb and try to get this documentation removed. You can prove that something wasn't your fault. You can prove that there wasn't anything negative. If the guest put something negative on your account, you can then, once you see guest favorites disappear, you can call them and say, hey, whatever reason you remove guest favorites, we want to dispute that. And you can go through a dispute process. But Sonder didn't have the manpower for that. And I saw this coming and I knew that they were going to have to take it to the face. I didn't think that they were going to go out of business over it. But Airbnb intentionally set up all 3 of these in order to make sure that Sonder would stumble and fall off their platform. That's really what they wanted, is they wanted to kill Sonder from the platform. And Sonder was so reliant on Airbnb that they couldn't make it work and they couldn't survive. So let's talk about what this means for everybody. Let's go to the next slide. So what this means for us all in 2026. I actually have to read this now. I'm actually kind of excited about this, guys. I do think that this is going to be really good long-term for us. Even though I have a vested interest in co-hosting and arbitrage, right? Because I grow through management, partnership, and rentals. I really don't like the idea of a landlord being scared. I don't really want to have to walk them through this or teach them that the reason why Sonder went out of business is because they're honestly bad at this. They were shiny, right? And when the Goliath of the industry falls, there may not be anything you can tell certain people to get the deal done. And that's one of the things that's really going to affect us is we are going to see less opportunity for arbitrage, or your sales pitch is going to have to be that good. Thank God I'm in sales. I'm going to work on it, right? But I think hosts in areas that share a footprint with Sonder, you guys will see a rise in average nightly rate. Congratulations. You're going to see a rise in nightly rate, so that's going to be good. Airbnb may relax some of their policies now. I think that this is a big thing. I think this could happen. Now that Airbnb has killed the company that they're trying to kill, right? Once this bankruptcy is over and the inventory is gone and it's all said and done, Airbnb may decide that they don't have an enemy from within anymore. And they might be more supportive to hosts, right? Wouldn't that be great? We finally get Airbnb to be nice to us again because the monster's gone. I really hope that that's the case. Honestly, I really do think that that's the case, and I hope so. We will see a slowing of investment into the space and a slower growth of inventory, not just because landlords are going to say no, right? That kind of like, I think the investors who own the high rises that knew the guy that got screwed, like that friends and family network, they're going to be so anti-Airbnb for a while. But this happens, right? Lincoln, the property management company, they decided to say no to corporate housing leases back like even before COVID or right during COVID, because not an Airbnb company, but because a regular company like a Murphy's Corporate Lodging or one of those corporate lodging companies, they screwed Lincoln out of $100,000 of rents. They didn't do Airbnb, but they still wouldn't allow corporate leases, which affected us, right? I think anybody whose hands were close to the fire are going to shut down, is really going to be a thing. But they're not going to shut down forever, because apparently Lincoln's back in the game. I've got students who are getting doors with Lincoln as we speak, so we'll see how that goes. But not only will the investment into the space slow down because of inertia with the landlords, but this type of, oops, somebody failed, will honestly scare some people away. There's a lot of people who come to like a YouTube channel like this to like try to see if the ideas are good or not. And I think that this news could be big enough that people decide not to get into the space, even owners. See, an owner who has a property that was thinking of doing short-term rentals, they find out that this multi-billion-dollar company went under, and that's what they did with short-term rentals. It can spook someone with the property to think that they would fail. Because again, if the Goliath of the industry fails, then how can I win, right? So I do think, though, we will see some of these commercial real estate companies, the ones that let Sonder do their thing, like Greystar did the same thing post-COVID. I think some of these companies are going to try their own hand at short-term rentals. I actually have a conversation with a building in Philadelphia for the same thing. They've got 90 empty doors, and I don't think it was Sonder, because these doors were empty a month ago. And we're talking about them running their own thing and me like consulting for them on building their own internal operations so they can have a go at it, because they've got 90 doors with furniture in there. But I think at scale, we're going to see some companies who say, hey, Sonder's gone, the furniture's still here. We've got the ability to get a better revenue than if we just long-term rent these, because the commercial real estate market's a little funky right now, right? So everything is risky. These big companies may give it a try. And so we won't see all of these units leave the space, but we're going to see them cannibalized or repurposed. And I do think you can actually kill all the slides from the bottom up, so we can get back to the main cam. From the bottom up, or whatever you like to do. I do think the last thing that we're going to see is we're going to see brand improvement. The fact that somebody like Sonder's gone, and the fact that guest sentiment should improve by way of people who booked Sonder units on Airbnb would blame Airbnb. They would not blame Sonder, right? This is where Airbnb's brand damage came from, where they had to start cleaning this up. So now that Sonder isn't going to be responsible for guests having negative experiences, the total negative experiences per 1,000 that's going to happen in the short-term rental space is going to drop a ton, right? Sonder dying may be the best thing that's ever happened to Airbnb, since they've gone public, right? This could be the very coolest thing for them. Their total net sentiment could increase. The short-term rental sentiment could increase all around. And it's the grain of rice that tips the scale, right? So let's say that there's enough positive talk versus negative talk now that the world, right, has decided that maybe short-term rentals are cool again. You know, Sonder's presence could have been just enough negativity that has kept short-term rentals down long enough. And Sonder being gone means that people's experiences can improve enough that there can be positive talk again. And we can start to get into a net positive year-over-year spin. It's not going to be right away. There's no way that Airbnb in 4 months is going to have like the best reputation ever because Sonder's gone. But in 2 years, we can see like a positive effect. Because look at the negative that happened post-COVID. There's all the boom that happened. Everybody threw their inventory in, a lot of like really sterile properties without personality, and all the greed that hit the market negatively affected the traveler, so much so that we started hearing about it end of 2023, 2024, now still in 2025. There's a bunch of videos going viral this spring about the collapse of Airbnb. It's still in vogue to talk about, right? So it's a couple years delayed. And so I do think in about 2 years, Airbnb is going to see a reputation recovery, and we'll start to see people get back into the space more optimistically in a couple of years. So I'm going to retract one of my outlooks that I made in a video a couple weeks ago. I thought that 2026 was going to see a pretty good rebound for investment into the space. And the reasons for that still exist, right? There are a bunch of people trying to sell their properties that can't sell. And even though like rates went down, like what, a quarter point, it hasn't really made the market really good for sellers or buyers still. There's still not a lot of transacting happening. Layoffs, record layoffs just hit, right? The worst Q4 layoffs since 2008, the worst October layoffs since 2003. And you know, people don't like to do layoffs in the fourth quarter. And the last time this happened, we had a recession, like a massive one. So going into 2026, I don't think people are going to be buying properties. So the reason for there to be more Airbnbs in the space still exists. There's homeowners who will have nothing that they can do with their property but to get a little risky. So I think 2026 could be a good year for co-hosts still, but we are going to see way less investment into the space if this sentiment drives people out, which means we may not actually see a growth of host inventory until 2027, which for you guys, that's great, right? Because if demand increases, but supply does not, then our rates go up and we get to win. And you saw this when New York banned Airbnb, hotel prices jumped 22%. When British Columbia, west coast of Canada, banned Airbnb, hotel prices in Kelowna went up 400%. So these types of ripple effects have an absolute effect on the net income of the remaining players in the game. So I think this is positive. There's no way that this isn't positive for anybody who's in the game. This is negative for people who are unsure about the industry and they may not get in, but then again, that's positive for us, isn't it? Less suppliers, more money for us. So it's really kind of exciting. Thank you guys for being in this. Do we have any questions? Who here has any questions if you have any? And I appreciate you guys coming to see me so we can talk about this. I will drop some of the sources that we have. I'll drop the Q10 so you can see the numbers. The Q10 doesn't make any sense. I feel like it's fraud. There's no way that they made $12,000 per door on a property. There's no way. Because I've seen their properties. They're tiny. A lot of them are small. There's no way that they made that much money. Losing $7,000 per door, that makes some sense. I can see that happening. But not if they made $12,000 cash per door. Then they just had so much bloat, tech bloat and like wage bloat and all this other crazy stuff. But I will put the Q10 down below. There's another article actually that I do want to share with you guys that I will also put in the description down below. Oh, it's saucy. I'm actually going to turn this down so you maybe can still see it. It says that Marriott and Sonder just had a messy breakup and the guests were the ones caught in the middle. This is a real good breakdown of that dynamics where Sonder was infecting Marriott the same way that Sonder was infecting Airbnb. And Marriott wasn't going to stand for it. Sonder made a sexy pitch somehow, right? They came with a check and with inventory, said, we're going to give you some money. And Marriott realized that they didn't want that money, that they weren't going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Now, the woman who became the interim CEO, do you recall her name, Riley?
Let's see, Janice Sears.
Janice Sears. Janice stepped in June 25th, 2025. That was 5 months ago. And Francis was the CEO since 2014. There's no way she could have saved Sonder in 5 months after all the damage that happened, right? So I feel bad for this girl. Her reputation was probably on the line. She was going to save the day, and she didn't. But it wasn't her fault. Is probably the one thing I will say. I hope Janice finds a good career somewhere a little less chaotic after this. But looking at the Q10, somebody should be in jail. Like Sonder shouldn't just be out of business. Somebody should be in jail for that BS. What's up, Micah? Good to see you, man. So with that said, guys, that's it for this one. Check the body for some links here at the end. Love you guys, and as always, I'll see you on the other side.